In this video, I'm going to be showing you specific exercises that can be used to strengthen the lumbar paraspinal muscles. But before we get into that, let's get some background on why you might want to strengthen the lumbar paraspinals in the first place. So for most of us, we have to be able to stand up throughout the day, some for longer periods than others. And the ability to stand erect without low back pain requires sufficient strength and endurance in multiple muscle groups, and some of those are listed right here. I usually divide these into three groups, and these are not traditional muscle groups, but they'll suffice for our argument here. So first we have the lower extremity muscles and the hip girdle, especially the gluteus maximus, medius, and minimus, and the hamstrings. The second group is the core, especially the transversus abdominis, also called the TRA for short, and then of course the lumbar paraspinals. And weakness in any one of these three groups will cause increased reliance on the others, eventually leading to muscle tightness, ischemia, and pain. And this right here really describes the cycle of overuse. So let me clarify that. So whenever I have a patient in the clinic with low back pain, I'll often give them this little spiel right here that I'm about to give you. And it's an oversimplification, but it works for both patient understanding of what's going on, and it also works for a general treatment approach. So let's suppose that the lower extremity muscles in the hip girdle contribute 1/3 to being able to stand upright. The core contributes the second third, and the lumbar paraspinals contribute the last third. Well, then let's suppose that patient, we do some testing, and it turns out they have a lot of weak leg muscles, and they have a weak core. Well, if there's weakness in these first two groups, then those two groups aren't going to be able to contribute their third of the effort to standing upright. So what's going to happen in that case? Well, the lumbar paraspinals are going to have to pick up the slack, but they're only meant to hold 1/3 of that contribution, right? They're postural muscles. They have a lot of type 1 muscle fibers. They're not meant to take larger loads, and they're going to be forced to take larger loads, so to speak, if these other groups aren't pulling their weight, literally. And so when the lumbar paraspinals have to pick up that extra slack, it tends to cause tightness, ischemia, and pain. In other words, those lumbar paraspinals are essentially being overused because of the weakness in the other two groups. And that's why, in general, we need to target these other things if we expect to get rid of somebody's low back pain. And even if we consider an athletic population, or even the general population that does not have low back pain, those lumbar paraspinals are arguably one of the, if not the most neglected muscle groups, especially when it comes to strengthening. Now, a little side note here. When people talk about the core, they're typically referring to muscles of the anterior abdominal wall, and those are listed here. Rectus abdominis, that's your washboard muscle in the center and front. You've got the external and internal abdominal obliques, and the TRA, which is the transversus abdominis. And those are important to be strong, especially the transversus abdominis when we think about the core. But really the core extends all the way around the entire circumference of the abdomen. So while these muscles right here make up both anterior and lateral core muscles, the paraspinals in the back make up the posterior core muscles. And so even if all these muscles are very strong, if your paraspinals are weak, it's going to predispose you to low back pain and a host of other problems downstream for that. And so for that reason, it's very important to keep those paraspinal muscles strong and also having sufficient endurance. And just as a little reminder here, these are the paraspinal muscles that you'll see in the lumbar spine. So we have the lumbar iliocostalis and longissimus. These comprise the erector spinae muscle group. You'll notice I did not put the spinalis here, which is an erector spinae muscle, but that only becomes prominent once you get to the thoracic spine. So there really is no spinalis in the lumbar spine. And technically with longissimus, you don't actually have a longissimus lumborum. It's actually longissimus thoracis, but there is a lumbar component of that. And then we have various small paraspinal muscles like the multifidi and others like the rotatories and transversus spinalis, etc. But those muscles are very, very small and likely don't contribute much to muscle contraction. And in general, these paraspinal muscles, for the most part, are kind of like the pelvic floor muscles. Pelvic floor muscles contract in unison, and it's really difficult to isolate them. So when we strengthen the lumbar paraspinals, we're really getting all of these. And at this point, let's go into looking at some specific exercises for strengthening the lumbar paraspinals. Enjoy!
Thank you for all your support. Be sure to check out my Instagram for cool science and not science stuff.